into another edition of Gas. I am Gresh. He is Jason Anik.
You were playing everybody and we're winning the game last night.
The head coach is fighting people on the sideline.
What do you got for me?
I know you're a part of Tight Pants Society.
No f***ing way is that a gimme, right?
Oh, welcome into another edition of Gas, ladies and gentlemen. I have a funny feeling we have a very combustible episode today. I am Gresh. I am very ornery. It was already starting with Jason Anik before we got on today. I love to critique things. I love to talk about things. That's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen, because I think before the end of this episode, Jason Anik, we will have an idea for the Patriots that they can't refuse, and I have a simple solution to fix the NIL problem when it comes to NCAA basketball. How are you, my very busy friend?
I'm great to see you, and I love how professional you are, but I love to see you. And so I just want to, before we get into sports, is that your voice off in the open, like, at the end? Because, man, it could be.
Yeah,
Cody,
I think it could be.
Is that your voice? That's Tom Brady. Even better.
He didn't rip that off from me. Yeah, that was, you know what that was? It was Brady in 2019 when he was 8-0 going, couldn't believe he was still there.
Well, I love it, and you can't hate being compared to Tom Brady. But I love having an hour with you every Tuesday morning live at 11 a.m. And as you jumped into sports, and we obviously have a lot to talk about, but I just like seeing my guy Gresh. So you're consistently working all the time. Am I wrong?
Well, I did do, what was it, Infinity Sports Radio last night, and I have Sirius XM tonight, and then again on the weekends with some ESPN thrown in as well. So knock on wood. I don't want to go AB business is booming, but you know what? Like I can kind of pick and choose. It's really, really sort of nice. And I get to do everything from here where I'm sitting at, for God's sakes. You know, I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be AB's cracker of the week for all the great work I'm doing, but you know, that's probably an award I can do without on the mantle.
Well, I don't subscribe to Sirius XM, but I think I need to because I have a great chance of catching you. And for those of you joining us for the first time, what is this, episode 19, Gresh?
We are at episode 19, yes.
And even though we are of similar age, I got to know you like this 20 years ago, listening to you on a very long commute that I had and was just an enormous fan. So for those of you that never heard that story, that's how I learned about Gresh. And I've liked him a little tiny bit less every day since. No, just kidding.
No, that's probably true.
No,
listen,
you said on a previous episode that I like you and I don't love you. And that's blasphemous. Anyway,
no,
I'll let you get it back on the rails.
No, but listen, the more people are around me, the less they are. Because they probably get to learn more of the, wow, he really is prickly sometimes. I'm not Dan Hurley level prickish, which we will get to because good grief, you know, this guy, some people just need the old attitude adjustment. But let me just start out with this, right? Well, sometimes, listen, there are those of us who need to have our behavior modified, and then there are some of us who will tell people to modify their behavior, right? And Dan Hurley now needs to hear about, I think, modifying his behavior. But let me ask you, because I sat down last night in front of America and just opened up the phones, and Jay, I was blown away with the amount of people who are still kvetching and bitching and moaning that we didn't have enough Cinderella action in the first two rounds of this NCAA tournament. Where do you land on that? Because, brother, the last time I checked, we, in no other sport do we root for the 8 seed to beat the 1 seed. Like in the NFL or in the NHL, we're never rooting for things to be turned upside down. But yeah, with the NCAA tournament, because there were no Cinderellas, there's a lot of people out there bitching.
I hear you. And I root for the Cinderella to make it close. Like the ideal situation was that Colorado State Maryland game, right? Where you get Jalen Lake for Colorado State hitting that 3-pointer with 6 seconds left. And then the freshman, Derek Queen, with the kiss off the glass. Great. And I will say, Cody put up on last week's show, buzzer beater, the line for there to be a buzzer beater in the tournament at even money. Now, I believe there was a buzzer beater in the play-in game, and I'm putting you on the spot here, but was there a buzzer beater prior to that Colorado State Maryland buzzer beater? Right. So, but either way, that cashes. But yeah, man, I'm thrilled with the tournament, however it shakes out. I actually like that it's kind of chalky for a change. And look, there's still plenty of opportunities for Cinderella. It may come later in the tournament. So this tournament delivers for me in the same way the NFL delivers for me, always, no matter how it shakes out.
I 100% agree with you. And I think that we've sort of worked ourselves into a shoot here because, Jay, there used to be a time where 12 and 13 seeds were considered upsets. Now, do you think anybody looks at a 12 or a 13 and is like, wow, my God, what a shocking win? Not anymore.
And Colorado State, who we were just talking about, was -2.5 in their first matchup as a 12 seed. And I believe at least 2 out of the 4 12 seeds won, if not 3.
Well, I do believe 3 of the 4 12 seeds were either like even or maybe even slight favorites. And you're right. But that's the thing. We've now conditioned ourselves that, I mean, honestly, it's got to be a 16 seed beating a 1 anymore, or a 15 beating a 2. Like, you know, my kids Bryant, if they'd beaten Michigan State, right? That would have been considered a big upset. But what would have happened in the next round? They would have been a sacrificial lamb. So it's nice that we would have had the tournament shaken up. But at the end of the day, when you look at the matchups, yes, it's name brand. And yes, there are probably some teams that you go, wow, I didn't realize they were really good at basketball. Like Ole Miss all of a sudden has now become pretty good at hoops. Texas Tech goes in and out, but you the overall point. People look at the name brands and they're just like, where's my Drake? Where's my Butler? And it's like, it doesn't kill you for an NCAA tournament to not have that this year.
Well, and if you're looking for a story or an A upset, look no further than John Calipari upsetting Rick Pitino, moving on, and Rick Pitino going to watch Richard Pitino, his son, coach New Mexico against Michigan State and try and beat Tom Izzo. There's plenty of juice for me. Go ahead.
By the way, how perfect was it that Ricky Whiteshoes is standing there watching Dick Pitino Jr. coach, and he's got the scarf wrapped around him, and right behind him is a woman with a set of like 32 double Ds. And so,
I missed that.
Oh no, well when CBS goes to show him, right? All of a sudden it's like, and there's head coach Rick Pitino, and then this woman almost kind of, she wasn't trying to get on camera, but all of a sudden this lady kind of leans over, and all you see is a giant set of tits over freaking Pitino's shoulder, which is perfect. I mean, it's the perfect. That's like the perfect photo of here's Ricky Whiteshoes, and you get the lady with the big hooters right behind him. But this Final Four, or excuse me, this round of 16 is going to be plenty for me. And some of the early lines, I will say this: a lot of these SEC teams. Now I know we have Kentucky against Purdue, but you're looking at Arkansas as
we don't. Kentucky faces Tennessee.
Oh, Tennessee, sorry. Kentucky, Tennessee, 2 SEC teams. So Kentucky, underdog. Now they're going against another SEC team. Ole Miss, underdog. Arkansas, underdog. Alabama, they're a favorite. Florida is a favorite. What constitutes success for the SEC in particular? Because the Big Ten's been there. The Big East has been there. The SEC hasn't been there since Kentucky won the championship in 2012. So I know there's the battle between the Big Ten, the SEC, who's got the best conference, yada, yada. But how do we really determine that? Like if the SEC schools all end up going to the Final Four, but say they all end up losing to a Duke or a Houston or something like that, does that mean they were still the best conference in college basketball this year?
Yeah, I think it does. And look no further than some of these matchups here we have in the Sweet 16. You know, if you talk about that Kentucky-Tennessee game, right?
Yeah.
They're the 2 and 3 seeds right where they should be. They faced twice in the regular season. And despite Tennessee having the higher ranking, I believe they're 6th in the country, Kentucky 18. Kentucky beat them twice in the regular season. January 28th at Tennessee, Kentucky wins 78-73. February 11th, that was at Kentucky, 75-64. Tennessee's defense, though, 17th in the country. Kentucky's 210th. Maybe that's part of the reason it's a 4.5-point spread. I already bet on Kentucky plus 4.5. But when you talk about the conferences and where they stand up, right, this tournament to me is not unlike the NFL postseason, where it is a single elimination tournament. Anything can really happen. So I think they've already sort of established themselves enough on paper. Duke is the favorite right now. I think they're going to be tough to beat, but when it is chalk early on, it does make the Sweet 16 fascinating. But good stuff there. A lot of dogs in that SEC.
Well, I'm looking at like Purdue, Michigan, Arizona, maybe even Maryland a little bit to a lesser extent, but maybe Arkansas as well. I like some of those bigger numbers to where you can maybe put them in a teaser and get 4.5 points and tease them up a little bit, because I think a lot of these games are going to be close. There isn't the proverbial Loyola of Chicago against Kentucky in this round.
Yeah. Well, and when I bet this tournament, I much prefer, I do bet to a certain extent for my own entertainment. And I hate to, if you want me to give you out a handicapping play, that's separate from entertainment. So I prefer to take points in this tournament. But for example, when I look at Maryland, Florida, and I know for those of you that tuned in last week, my brother has a ticket on Florida 30-1. So we're in the process of hedging Florida and, done very little hedging so far, have hit every hedge so far because you were able to gobble up a lot of points. But Florida gets a great scare from UConn, right? Florida didn't lead in the second half of that game until there were under 3 minutes to go. And I think that's an absolutely great test against the back-to-back champions. And I think that scare will be part of what propels them perhaps to cut down the nets. But I don't think Maryland has enough to get through them. Walter Clayton Jr. is unbelievable. I think he could be the number one pick in the NBA draft. So I don't love taking the points when I don't like them to win the game. I'll be looking to play the Florida Gators money line if I'm not hedging John's action, playing the Florida Gators money line somewhere tied to something else.
I dig that. I do. And I think that there are some favorites that for me, I do like. I know I just said, hey, give me Arizona. If I can get 4.5, that's going to jack that up to 14. Duke might cover that even against a team as good as Arizona. And I think once Cooper Flagg came back, because Jay, I thought, why play the guy in the first weekend? No need to.
Let him rest. You on that.
Let him get right. And instead they come out and they play a 16 seed. Here's Cooper Flagg, and he's got 18 points and Duke is up 40, right? Yep. So at the end of the day, there are going to be some of the blue bloods that are going to be there, but these matchups should satiate the college basketball fan. And it to me, Jay, it's just a fascinating study of left brain, right brain, right? Like, for example, there were a lot of people in New England, and you were one of them, I'm sure, who hated the arrogance of the Yankee fan. 27 this, all that, right? So the left brain Red Sox fan hates arrogant Yankee fan, but right brain Patriot fan became arrogant Yankee fan with all the winning. You know what I mean? So It's just fascinating to me, the what America does and doesn't react to. And if honest to God, Jay, Arkansas is a 10 seed. If it said Drake, people would be happy. It's an SEC team that's a 10 seed. And that's why people are looking at this and thinking that it's just the big name invitational and not looking at the number attached to the team.
Bingo. And what a great underdog you have, John Calipari, with that team.
Oh,
and look,
yeah.
And the Rick Pitino story is interesting no matter what. I think it was 6 team that he led into the tournament. They're 28% from the field, and they're just out. But I think it's interesting for Florida, the way that bracket has shaken out. And Cody, at some point, if you can pull up the board, I'm just, like, to me, Gresh, I hate to say it, as chalky as it is, I think Duke and Florida make it to the next round. So I'm looking at some, dare I say, some square money line parlays perhaps in this next round, right? I'm not go blue, I'm go Bruce. I think Auburn is good enough to get through here, right? So, to me, I would potentially look at some money line parlays here. I'll be rooting hard for John Calipari. I think Ole Miss is live.
I do too.
Michigan State started out a little bit, I don't know. I like Ole Miss on the money line. I like them plus a 3.5. Like their head coach there, Chris Beard, Tom Izzo. What a great matchup there. Should have some heat. When Chris Beard got to Ole Miss, right, only a couple years ago, they were like the worst team in the SEC, right?
Yep.
And in just 2 years, right, back in the Sweet 16, win these 2 games by an average of 15 points. But Duke winning these 2 games by an average of 33 points, I'll click that minus 485 without even thinking about it. I like Arizona a little bit, but give me Duke and Florida money line, as chalky as that sounds, right? I mean, Gresh, stranger things have happened. Give me all of that.
No, I'm with you.
Teams find a way into the Final Four, 161 American dollars to pay me 100. Give me that.
Well, and if you're looking at Florida and Duke as your base, then you can rotate through some of the other teams, like throw Houston in there if you wanted to. If you like Houston and Auburn, now you end up getting that at plus 153. So I do love those money line parlays. I do think teasers are in play here as well. And no, that's an astute point, because even though we have big name brands, I still think there are some very heavy leans as to who are winning these games outright.
No question about it. And for those of you that tuned in last week, it really is interesting that my brother John Anik has action on Florida at 30-1. The hedging opportunities are endless, right? We were down in Coconut Creek yesterday, Seminole, and he's placing bets, Gresh, yesterday, right? On regional parlays. So Duke, so hear me out though. Hear me out, right? Duke, Auburn, and Houston, yep. The other 3 1 seeds tied to Arkansas to get to the Final Four, tied to Texas Tech or whatever, right? The other teams to get out of that region other than Florida. And they're, he's got a wager $300 to pay $9,300. There are great ways to put yourself in a position to make a few grand if Florida doesn't end up hoisting the trophy.
Boy, these are some
there
really,
you go, Bone.
These are really smart plays. Yeah, I like what I love.
19-1.
Look at that. So Duke, Houston, Texas Tech, others thrown in there. 1892. That's fit. Wow. Duke, Houston, Auburn, Texas Tech.
And the point being, you don't have to go crazy, right? A couple $100. And you can be sure he already covered his 300 because Florida has not covered, right? You can be sure he was gobbling up the points against the other teams. So far, you got to take the points and try and hit it both ways. But look, I'll tell you right now, Walter Clayton Jr. is fucking him.
Oh, yeah.
I love Florida as much. Talk about Cooper Flagg, and I know Duke and Auburn's got a player, first team All-American.
Johnny Broom, yeah.
There you go. So, but I'm enjoying the tournament, Gresh. I think you and I could give a rat's ass about the quote-unquote Cinderella.
100%.
Colorado State assistant coach Farouk Manesh, right? That guy's, he's catching on the screen. He used to play, I forget where it was. But to me, I like seeing all those old names from old Cinderellas, but the tournament is the tournament. I'm all fired up.
And now the silly season has begun. So you want to hear some crazy numbers on NIL? Well, because a lot of people are saying, Jay, that NIL is the reason we don't have the Cinderella wins in the first 2 rounds. And I don't completely subscribe to that theory. However, the NCAA has been complicit in the demise of NIL or letting it turn into what it's turned into. So how about this? In 2022, on day 1 where you could go into the portal, there were just over 175 players that put in. In 2023, that number jumped up to about 225 or so. Last year, first day of the portal was pushing 300. Yesterday, over 700 players jumped into the portal on the first day.
Wow.
So over 700 dudes are out there thinking they can go get a better job or that they can go get more money elsewhere. And now everyone's waking up and going, oh my God, the NCAA has done nothing about this. Well, that's about what they always do. They were going to let basketball, seriously, in football runs itself. People don't know this. The NCAA hands them a trophy at the end of the year, but Charlie Baker doesn't tell the conference commissioners a damn thing when it comes to football. They're the ones that push back on him. The NCAA is vested into the success of their tournament. Yet, for 3 years, they have been absent on doing anything NIL, which could sink their tournament. They are right, and I like Charlie Baker personally, but god dang, the NCAA is allowing this thing to be hurt in different ways. So do you get wrapped up in all this NIL mess relative to the NCAA tournament? Because I know it's a mess out there, but to me, this just feels like the year where there wasn't the big Cinderella team like a San Diego State that you could sink your teeth into.
I agree with all of that. And as I become more of a college sports fan, unfortunately, I will have to dive into the NIL mess. Bill Belichick arriving in Chapel Hill makes that necessary for me because it's just more necessary for me to sort of understand how all of that works. But other than, being on the Jay Billis train and being happy that these guys are getting paid and earning what they deserve, I sort of, it's a bandwidth thing for me. But this tournament certainly moves the needle. And I know we're going to get to it later, but I covered dirty boxing this weekend. So that removed me from college basketball. At one point, I'm in my room prepping fighters and I'm watching, I got basketball on. It's distracting me. So we turned it off. But the tournament's one of my favorite things. And watching that Colorado State Maryland game, I know I've brought it up twice now. That gave me my whole fill. just watching the end of that game. You get back-to-back sort of buzzer beaters. What else are you looking for? And
No,
the favorite emerging, which I love. Go ahead.
Well, there you go, from the degenerati end of things. But I think for NIL, yes, there's going to be classism. So I think there's an easy fix. What do you do is, like, if you're San Diego State, and I know I'm using them again because they were in the national championship game last year in the Final Four. If that's a school that knows they're going to lose people, maybe what they should do is you can write these scholarships and NIL deals however you want. So maybe we need a little bit of a Japanese baseball posting system, or that X% of the promise to the player, maybe 10%. Say they promised the player $1 million. Well, you got to, that school's got to write a check for $100,000 to the school that the player leaves, that they're basically poaching. They got to figure out a way. It's almost like revenue sharing in a way in baseball, except not everybody reinvests. So I do wonder, because these other schools are now looking at it saying, okay, the SEC is starting to get serious about basketball now. But I love needling SEC fans on the, how can you lose to a lowly Big East program? You have all these resources, and you tell us how great the SEC is, and you lose to the third team in the Big East.
That's hilarious. And I tell you what, all this NIL talk makes me further happy to be a fan of professional sports.
You know what it should make you want to be as an agent representing some of these dudes.
No doubt.
My guy, my agent, who I have used for 20 years, has and congratulations to John Anik on signing with Athletes First. I saw that over the weekend. Good on him to get the high level representation. Come on, John, drag us all along. But when my agent has now gotten involved in this whole NIL world. So now you have guys who would normally be representing players to redo their contracts.
Wow.
And now you're going back to the collective. In fact, I'll just straight up tell the story because now he's coming out. Ozzy Trapillo, the kid from BC, big bastard, 6'8", 315. Penn State wanted him, and they called him last year. I know this for a fact. So, the poaching goes on during the year. And, of course, he's smart. He goes to Boston College and say, listen, I got somebody knocking on the door and I play a premier position for you. They found a couple extra bucks to be able to keep the guy. Now he might be a Patriots draft pick. But speaking of the draft, brother, and I know we got Dan Hurley to get to. I want to talk to you a little bit about dirty boxing. But I almost called you. And you and I will normally text, busy during the week, stuff like that. You have kids. I got to lay around. But when I saw Jameis Winston,
did you just say I got to lay around? That's hilarious.
Yeah.
It took me a minute, a little slow here on a Tuesday morning. Go ahead.
That's okay, brother. But when I saw the Giants sign Jameis Winston, I thought, that was a blue pill for me, because to me, that was the indicator that the Giants are drafting a quarterback, which means, as you and I've talked about on, I feel like almost every episode of Gas, Travis Hunter could be sitting there at number 4 for the New England Patriots, and I'm getting giddy over it.
I'm so glad you just led me there talking about how giddy you are, because I think with your excitement, I think you're very reserved most of the time, right? I think like this, and by no means do I think you're sort of in any way negative looking at the Patriots, but very real. So your excitement in all these different areas, whether it's talking about this possibility or even your excitement about what's happening from a free agency standpoint is just so fun for me, because I know you're not like a child with it, maybe in the same way that I am.
Well, it's not that you're a child. You're a real, here's what it is for me. I become an analyst and then maybe a fan. You're still a fan and then an analyst. And that's
bingo. So, Jameis Winston, to me, yes. Does that indicate perhaps Jameis the backup, Shedeur Sanders coming in underneath him? Yes, perhaps. But in this quarterback market, who knows, right? My younger brother Dave is talking to me all about Joe Shane and Brian Dable and this pick. They're going to go with Shedeur Sanders at number 3 because otherwise, they you bring that kid in, maybe it buys them another year. That whole narrative, to me, I still think Joe Shane and Brian Dable are obligated to pick the best player available, or not take Shedeur Sanders if they don't see the value in that spot. But before I get excited about Travis Hunter, what's the date of the draft? Because this thing is so fluid, right? Cody will drop it in there. But so
we are inside a month.
Okay, so Gresh, before we get excited, right? Today on Sports Illustrated, I have a mock draft for you. And then I'm going to ask you a question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the mock draft today. The Titans take Cam Ward at 1, Abdul Carter, number 2 to the Cleveland Browns, number 3, Travis Hunter to the Giants, right? Then they have us taking Will Campbell, the Patriots at 4, Mason Graham 5. Just hold on. I'm just telling you what their mock was. And then you can roll. Campbell at 4, Mason Graham 5 to the Jags, Ashton Genty to the Raiders at 6, and then Shedeur Sanders to the Jets. I don't see him being there at 7. Go ahead on that, first of all.
I do not think the New England Patriots look at Will Campbell as a top 5 player. And I think that is evident in the way they have acted, scouted, and kind of set up their existing roster. Is that fair to say?
No question. And I'm glad. And I was going to ask you if you would take Mason Graham over Will Campbell, and I got my answer.
Well, if the Patriots had not sunk a bunch of resources into their kind of defensive linemen, I would think that Mason Graham would be in play. And honestly, Jay, as crazy as it sounds, I don't rule it out. I would be devastated. Here's the thing. Elliot Wolf came out and said, well, maybe we were a little too almost like what I would call, it's a radio sales term, spots and dots, right? Of the whole, well, we have a spot open right there. Let's try to find a guy to fit into it versus drafting for the best player available and realizing that you might have to coach around some holes on your football team. And I think that is pure Mike Vrabel. And you and I talked about this. Sign free agents to get back to par, to where you can at least field a team that can be functional. Then you start to add the other pieces on top of it. And Jay, the way this draft is looking, everybody's saying they don't have a left tackle. They have 2 guys they can survive with. And everybody else you would like to think is going to be better or more set because of Doug Marrone and because of Josh McDaniels. You know what you're getting. Heard David Andrews talking about the complaint. He's like, listen, what McDaniels does isn't complex. It's thorough. So you do get to the right play at the right time. And he said that's why they'll take it slow with May early on, because McDaniels has to trust the guy. I know I'm rambling a little bit.
No, you're good.
But they have so many different ways, Jay, that they can go. And there will be, the one good thing about them this year is they'll be able to write 1-year deals closer to camp because they'll have a lot of money. So there might even be the one guy coming off rehab or the one guy that didn't want to sign who is all of a sudden out there, and you could bring him in midway through training camp, kick the tires on him, get him up and running, and you sort of steal a starter right before the season starts.
No question about it. I still can't believe that the Patriots put themselves in a position to not be in control of this draft, right? And as excited as you are about Travis Hunter, when I look at the top 3, and I want to ask you a question about the Cleveland Browns. Cam Ward at 1, so just take it off the board. I think he's going to the Tennessee Titans. I think I saw a line at -700. I think that's happening. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, man, I really consider Shedeur Sanders. I would love to know what those conversations with Myles Garrett entailed, right? I wonder if there was any talk about what they may do with the number 2 overall pick, right? I don't know what I think of Shedeur Sanders and the prospect as an NFL player, but for the Browns, Abdul Carter, is he a franchise-changing player? Do you even peek at Travis Hunter there? But the way SI had it laid out with Ward, Carter, and then Travis Hunter 3rd to the Giants, I guess I'm curious from your standpoint, do you think the Browns and or Giants, don't you think one of them takes the Shedeur Sanders bait?
Oh, yeah. And I think it'll end up being the Giants. Because look, if Cleveland drafts Shedeur Sanders, they're all getting fired. They're all getting fired. Just look at it from a simple quarterback standpoint. Deshaun Watson had to have another surgery to repurpose the Achilles. So they went out and got Kenny Pickett, knowing that Kenny Pickett could be a low-level starter. So if you know that Watson is coming back at some point this year, you draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2. Sanders isn't starting, because if you start him, then you know Watson's never getting back on the field, and they owe him $90 million still over 2 years, and they funny moneyed it with the cap. So you mean to tell me they would draft the guy that if everyone is upright, it goes Watson, then you hope you can see enough of Sanders for him to be the backup, and then you have Kenny Pickett. if that's another 6-win season in Cleveland, regardless of who the quarterback is, you're Gerard Mayo and you're the Eberflus, like who got fired in Chicago. You got to draft people who can come in and actually help you try to win games if you're Kevin Stefanski, because otherwise you're drafting for the next guy. And Jay, quite honestly, might be the same thing with the Giants.
Well, right.
They might draft Shadir Sanders, and then it's the exact same thing as to what happened in New England and Chicago. So I think some of the ownership and the leadership of some of these teams, they've got to make sure, like, if you're going to allow Joe Schoen to draft a young quarterback, is he going to be around to finish the mission, or is it going to get weaponized and used against him at the end of the year when they blow his ass out, which they probably should have last year?
You know, the whole conversation about these GMs and head coaches sort of drafting for their jobs and stuff. Oh, it's such a, I understand it's a reality, but it's not my favorite conversation. I think it's really interesting. I think it comes down to what you think of Shedeur Sanders. And I would argue for the Cleveland Browns, if you like Shedeur Sanders, and look, I think it works both ways. Let's say you like him and you want to start him right away. Deshaun Watson is just $50 million on the. If I'm the Cleveland Browns, I would love nothing more than to start Shedeur Sanders at that rookie contract and have Deshaun Watson have to back him up. Do you know what I mean? But if you don't think he's ready and needs a year, but you like him a lot, then I absolutely pull the trigger there. But I think it comes down to how you feel about Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. And I think ultimately, whether you're the Browns or the Giants, if I were owning one of those franchises, I would love to be able to have a conversation with the general manager and the coach and say, you know, and really be able to have that conversation about drafting, because neither of those teams are hoisting a trophy next year. So you really can't be thinking about next season. And I would argue this is maybe about 3 years down the line. So I've said I like Dable more than Shane. I do think they like Stefanski there. But for me, if you like Shedeur Sanders, assuming Cam Ward is off the board, if you like him enough and you're the Cleveland Browns, you got to pull that trigger.
Yeah, I think they got to tread lightly here. They do, and we know their dopey owner Haslam is going to have some kind of say in it as to, you know, where they want to go, what they want to do. I do think it is an open discussion, because if you look at the Browns roster, they could take Travis Hunter and start him at corner now. There's a spot, and if they drafted Abdul Carter, there's a spot opposite of Myles Garrett, which is amazing when you think about that division. I mean, here's the other thing, too. If Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers, now if you're Cleveland, doesn't that change the way you also sort of look at building your team? Because just in division alone, if you're Cleveland, you're dealing with Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and then Aaron Rodgers for 6 of your 17 games. You'd better have a pass rush. You'd better have a defense. And is Shedeur Sanders maybe sitting on the sidelines going to help you beat those teams? Likely not. So there is a real danger that Hunter could get poached at number 2. And then I think for New England, Jay, that changes everything for them in the first round.
You know, it's as much as I wish they were controlling the board at 1, it's so fun being in that number 4 spot. And not unlike, you know, whether it was going to be Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel, and I really am glad that it's Mike Vrabel, but I felt as though they couldn't really mess that up, if I'm being honest with you. I know it would be a very different picture if it had been Ben Johnson.
Yep.
But in a way, even with the free agency having all this money, I felt like it was almost impossible to throw up all over themselves with Mike Vrabel in the room. And in the same way with this number 4 pick, I really think it's hard to mess this up, even if you end up moving a couple spots down out of that spot. I just really think you have put yourself in a position, and the way this draft lays out, right? If you're sitting at 7 or 8 in this draft and you're the Patriots, it's sort of like, you know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, you're still going to get a good player, but I think they're in a great spot. I can't wait to see how it shakes out. And one more thing quickly, Gresh. Stephon Diggs, we touched on a bunch of wide receivers and potential free agent wide receivers, spent some time in New England. I don't know if he's going to be ready for week 1, but I definitely said last week that I think he has the most upside. I wouldn't mind that juice. I'm starting to like that juice in Foxborough a little more every day.
Well, I think it depends on whether you get Hunter or not, because I think if Hunter lands here, he's the number 1 wide receiver, and then he's a corner that you mix in. Now, maybe they get him on the field and say, holy Jesus, we can't.
But Diggs is a 2. I don't mean to interrupt you. Diggs
is very true. Diggs is a 2, no question. But if they would sign him, I think it would be after the draft. I think make him sweat it out a little bit. Let him wait to kind of, get his job and try to get the number the best you can. But my gut feel tells me if they get Hunter, they're not going with Diggs. If they get someone else or move down, then Diggs is the guy that you bring in to be the other complimentary wide receiver. And then Hollins, I think Bourne, I'm hearing good things out of Foxborough about Bourne. Now, maybe it's all poppycock and they're setting it up for him to get cut.
What are you hearing, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's the whole that, is this the guy you want? He's 29 years old. He's had multiple injuries. He's a great locker room guy. But is he one of those dudes that you just look at and say, I'd rather put Kayshon Boutte out there and let him make mistakes and let him learn, knowing there could be a future, versus a guy like Kendrick Bourne. But say Bourne stays around and your starting wide receiver group is right now it's listed as Hollins, Bourne, and Douglas. But you slide out Hollins and you put Steph Diggs in there, and you're saddling with May, Stevenson, Steph, Bourne, Pop Douglas, the two tight ends they have, which they will upgrade. Mark my words on that. There will be another tight end here. And then your offensive line, it makes you feel like with Josh McDaniels, you have a chance to at least be competitive. Whereas last year, it felt like you had no chance to be competitive.
No doubt about it. I honestly, Gresh, I feel as though I will feel 12 years old inside my body on week 1 of the NFL season.
Yeah.
And what's great, though, is through all this offseason with all these free agents, we haven't talked much about Drake May. And I'd love to know how he's spending his days to try and get better every day.
Yeah, me too. Because I'm not hearing a lot. And unlike Tom Brady, where he would go to, a public park to have a game of pitch and catch with anybody who would want to do it. Yeah, I saw some quotes from the old man. Mark May, not that Mark May, the old offensive lineman, but Mark May, Drake's dad. And he was like, yeah, the kid's smart. He'll adapt. He'll be fine to McDaniels, da-da-da. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, I hope he is attacking this offseason and learning the offense with some vim and vigor and fervor, because my stance on Joe Milton. I don't think there's a need for him to be on this roster. However, I wonder if the Drake May offseason might lead to the Patriots at least bringing him to camp and changing the timing of a potential Joe Milton trade, if there's going to be one. And I would dare say, Jay, now that I think about it, if Milton is here, I do wonder if that's a little bit of a hedge from the new coaching staff. Even though we all love Drake May, they're going to put him through the paces way differently than the previous administration did.
I'd love to see Joe Milton stick around. I've always loved depth at that position. I just don't think it hurts. And I think that him even just sitting on that roster, that week 18 performance from last season will continue to age well. And if the Patriots hold on to him, even regardless of what conversations took place, that certainly can show the market that, we like this guy. We're holding on to this guy, keeping him close to the vest, and perhaps mid-season. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, let's remember, Elliot Wolf's dad was one of the best at flipping quarterbacks, like you had just talked about, right? Keep a guy on the roster, let him sit there. Well, he played 3 games. He played great. Let's trade him for a second-round pick. And it was Matt Hasselbeck. I'm trying to remember back in the day with Ron Wolf in Green Bay. I do believe he successfully traded 4 backup quarterbacks for currency. I think, if I've got this right, it was Aaron Brooks to New Orleans. It was Hasselbeck to Seattle, traded Johnson to Buffalo, I think it was. And there's one more in there that I'm kind of forgetting about, but all ended up getting picks. Oh, Mark Brunell ended up getting picks for all of those backup quarterbacks. And if little Elliott can pull that off, I mean, he has clearly been neutered. I don't know if you saw him speaking the other day. He's been, oh my God, it's like, hey kid, go back to the corner table, and we'll call you when grandma's got the turkey dinner ready.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, exactly. The less hard-ass edge line lost me forever with that dude. Tell me you're a pussy without using the word pussy. Like, really? That's what that felt like. And I know we shouldn't be naughty. But speaking of, is Danny Hurley a fiery competitor or a mega asshole?
So as he was leaving the court, right? And what was he saying? Hope they don't do you like they did to us, or whatever it is. And so before I answer this, I will just say, back-to-back defending champion head coach of the UConn Huskies, right? People don't like the favorites. But the eye test, right? Like, I would ask you, is he the same guy that he was before he cut down the nets twice? I don't know about that, right? Feeling himself maybe a little bit. I've always been a Bobby Hurley guy, right? Even despite Bobby Hurley's greatness, he's always sort of seen a little humility on the face. And I do think, right, you can learn a lot of people. You could use a phrase like kindness in the eyes or whatever. You could see some things in people's eyes, right? Yeah. So if you're asking me if he's a fiery competitor or mega asshole and I have to check a box, I'm checking the box for the latter. No thanks on DH.
Yeah, here's the thing with Dan Hurley where I think it's kind of gone to, right? When he got to URI, and I think I might have told you some of these stories off the air, year one, Bobby Hurley was an assistant. And you could tell that there was too much of a sibling rivalry between those two, right? It was almost like you couldn't remain professional if those two lost their ish against each other and would start screaming and things like that. So there's always been the inferiority complex that is built into Dan Hurley. The problem is he's now gone the way of what some would say is like someone in the White House right now, where they're run amok with power and the Lakers came calling, right? So he's Big Dong Danny standing there with the, you can also get hit with the dangled dong of destiny as well in a very bad way. So this guy is now walking around like he's packing heat like a porn star and is telling everybody, I'm the best in college basketball, blah, blah, blah. Now, look, what he said about Baylor walking off the court of the whole, boy, they effed us, Baylor. I hope they don't F you like that, Baylor. I really hope they don't get you. And then what made it worse was and I will say this at risk of potentially losing work because I have done some UConn games before. This is where your a-hole coach who has enabled people to act like lunatics because they're the two-time defending national champions. That's where you get this putz who is the SID over at UConn who goes to the kid who did the video who was doing his job and said, if you don't take it down, I will ruin you. Now, let me tell you, you and I, Jason Anik, have dealt with, you're in an MMA world where you want to talk about interesting characters, they're everywhere you turn. In the media world, there are some SIDs that are really easy to get along with, and then there are some that are just dinks. What gets me is that this goof, this guy who is the SID, is so terrible at his job. He's walking behind Dan Hurley when Dan Hurley is saying what he's saying. Walking right behind him. Look for the big lumpy guy with the massive receding hairline. You'll see the dude. He's right behind Hurley. And he doesn't notice what is then later supposedly a guy there who is in the wrong place videotaping something. No, what happened was Asshat Johnson, who's the SID, got caught. Hurley got mad at him, yelled at him. He went and yelled at some underling, and that kid said, whiz off, dude. I'm doing my job. And then it blew up, and then this goof, sorry, I'm on a roll, then this SID guy, he put out a tweet that he deleted yesterday. SID yells at reporter news at 11. No, dick, you threatened him. That's different. And you said that to me. My response would have been on the news. That would have, like me cussing you out, would have had somebody videoing it, because seriously, you're going to go tell some kid who's a videographer that you're ruining him? How about this? When he walked by you, he could have pegged you the finger because you were too busy with your lips connected to Hurley's ass. Like, God almighty. And that made it worse. Like, it, you know what it did? It highlighted that Dan Hurley is enabling his top people to run around and do the whole, Coach Hurley told me to tell you this, da-da-da. It's like, get out of here with that stuff.
Well, it's interesting, but he's been on with Adam Shine forever on Sirius XM radio, and Adam obviously knows him well. And so for me, right, it's so interesting. When I first started doing shows like this, I feel as though my brother John Anik put me in this spot to do it because maybe I would talk shit to him about something going on and make him laugh. And then I get a microphone and I'm like, oh God, I sound just like John. I can't say any of the shit I used to say to him anymore, right? So even when I talk about a guy like Danny Hurley, I'm so predisposed to not talk shit, Gresh, for real, because I my brother really does have to
Yeah.
remain neutral in a lot of spots. So it really is interesting. Before we, wow, I just heard something as if a bomb went off.
Was the I don't know if that was the I went off. If we're about to go off, it was Cody hit a sounder that made us pause and be like, wait, what, we got breaking news? The breaking news last night was that JuJu Watkins is out for the rest of the tournament on the women's side. That broke late last night. Unfortunate for who should be the National Player of the Year.
She looked injured. I almost played them to win the whole tournament. They certainly had no problem winning the game. I've said, for my eyes, and I don't watch a lot of women's basketball, but she's the best I've ever seen in terms of, really, for me, like in terms of watching the way she plays the game. This is not meant to be sexist, but looks most like a man to playing the game. How I've seen it, just looks like she can get to wherever she wants to get all the time. Yep. The way and just so young. So yeah, that's really, really disappointing to see her not on this stage. I don't know the answer to this. Maybe Cody Merrow does, who is so locked into the women's game. That's another conversation.
Yeah.
Bone, I love you, but I was intending to go off on that. But Cody, I don't know if you know if she was going to be staying at USC for another year or not, or going into the draft, or if this would impact that one way or another. He says, yeah, she's staying. Okay, beautiful. Because, gosh, I would have loved to see her in the Final Four and get more eyeballs on her. Because even though Cody and Gresh love the women's game, it is still an evolving sport.
No, it is. And the WNBA rules are different. I do believe you cannot enter the draft before the year you turn 22 or you graduate early. So like there are no that well there should be one and dones in women's college basketball, quite honestly. Like Paige Beckers and JuJu Watkins and people like that could have ended up, bailing out, but there is the thought of, okay, you're younger, you need to develop, you're going against women, yada, 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 stuff like that. But that's devastating for USC. It pulls a favorite off the board. It really opens the way for what might be a South Carolina-UConn final, which sign me up for all of that. How can you not respect what Don Staley has done? And look, Auriemma, can he grade on people at UConn? You bet your ass. But like what Hurley is doing is after 2 championships. Gino's got like 2 hands full of rings for him, and he's like kind of calmed down over there a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and talk about the women's game all day. No, actually, I couldn't. And I got nothing on the... No, I mean, yeah, I'm excited. Yes, if those two face in the final, great. You could put Cody on camera instead of me if we're going to sit here. Cody and you sending me these breakdowns. I'm trying to cover a boxing event. I get all this women's bracket stuff. Now, I understand you guys have both made thousands of dollars over the last week or whatever on the women's game. But yeah, I got no more time for the women's game. But before you move us forward, I just want to say one thing, and I feel as though this is maybe too under the radar. Mookie Betts is sick. Mookie Betts has lost 25 pounds. He can't keep any food down. He weighed 175 pounds. He now weighs 150. He got sick 2 days before he went to Japan. He can drink smoothies and stuff, but anytime he tries to eat anything, he can't keep it down. So he weighs about what I weigh right now. And I saw about a 5-minute interview with him. He doesn't know. He's like, I just can't imagine like playing a game, not eating. He still intends to play, even being light, to use his words. But it's a story that he's had you could be sure out in California and LA, he's getting all the best doctors, getting all the right tests. Yeah. All the blood work is coming back clean. But something just sort of going on down there, and it's serious. And I don't know. I just, I saw the word bet on my tab, and Mookie popped into my head. I just want to share that with you.
Well, I know that you're a big Mookie fan because this is not the first time that you have brought Mookie up whenever we would get into hardball. And I'm trying to get ramped up for baseball. I can't do it. By the way, I pulled up I just threw Mookie Betts into the Google machine, and there are wild sort of headlines on this. Like one in the New York Times, Dodgers Betts has turned a corner after shedding nearly 20 pounds. That was 2 hours ago. But on NBC News 2 hours ago, it says, Mookie Betts says body's just kind of eating itself as mystery illness sidelines him.
Well, that was yesterday. So hopefully the fresher news is the better news, and hopefully he's okay. But Gresh, I couldn't disagree more. I'm so jazzed for Boston Red Sox baseball, as is our producer Cody Bone Merrow. What's not to be excited about, right? And look, I know there's some injuries heading in, whatever it is. I know the Celtics haven't even touched on that. Jason Tatum with sprained ankle last night, and you know what?
God.
And you know what? We'll get to the Red Sox maybe next week. But Jason Tatum, right? We can talk about the sprained ankle. I hope that it is not a long-term thing, but either way, it affects the cardiovascular base when you're not able to continue to be in basketball shape. But Domantas Sabonis, whatever your first name is, right?
Yeah,
I'm a fan of your dad, Arvidas. He was right in that landing space, as egregious as it gets. I understand it was a flagrant, but that's a sportsmanship thing, bro. You got to be better than that.
Yeah, you can't be hurting dudes out there. And you don't think about getting your feet underneath a player whenever they elevate for a jump shot. Like us slow old whites, we have no elevation on our jump shot. So we don't have to worry about guys getting underneath of us, or, we're more about the whole somebody flopping into you and knocking you down. They're pro athletes. They control their body. They know what they're doing. And yeah, that was pretty crappy. I had that game on last night, and I saw him roll his ankle, and I'm like, oh my God, please don't tell me this is now we're going to be sitting on Jason Tatum watch until early May for him to come back in a second round, because I guess that is the one good thing about the way the Celtics are built, Jay, is that even if Tatum couldn't play in a first round series, which it doesn't look like this is going to be really serious, but if someone went down, you can still survive a round in waiting for someone to come back, because they're just loaded. I mean, loaded. And Porzingis is looking better and better by the day.
No question about it. I mean, the list of players that are truly expendable, I think, is actually long, right? I've said for a long time, I think the Celtics could win another trophy, even with a big injury, right? Man, I think Porzingis is so important. It's hard for me to see if he's totally out. Obviously Tatum, Brown, it's hard for me to imagine, but even, I say, a guy like Drew Holiday, even a guy like Peyton Pritchard, if you get a big injury, I think you could actually recover and maybe still win. The thing about winning a back-to-back title, it's so difficult. So for me, the ebbs and flows, I've talked about this already in different circumstances. I see Tatum go down March 25th. Yeah, okay. It's just, you just got to sort of roll with it. And if you're going to win back-to-back titles, you're going to have to peak at the right time. There's going to be a dog coming out of the West, even if you do get through the East. Everyone's talking about Cleveland and how great they are. They scare me so much less than everybody else. I love how the Celtics match up against that team in the postseason, especially the way that, you guys are the number one seed. Watch what we come do in Ohio. What do we got on the board?
No doubt, brother. And that's a, Celtics winning the East, OKC winning the West. 100 gets you a really nice payout there at over plus 200 on that parlay. And Jay, I'm with you. The more I look into Cleveland, the more I feel better about the Celtics beating them. And I go back to experience as well. And I know I've harped on this and mentioned it before, but Al Horford on his own has played in more playoff games than literally the entire Cleveland roster. It's pretty close number for number.
And that matters.
Matters big time. If they're on the road, Game 6 in Boston, Celts are up 3-2, and you're the team with home court, but you got to go survive a Game 6 on the road just to get it back home. Tatum did that, did it against Milwaukee, went and won a big Game 6, pumped in 50, got him back home. We'd see if the Cavs could do the same thing in a similar spot. I am not so sure. Well, Evan Mobley is the real factor for Cleveland. If he plays like a superstar and gives Donovan Mitchell kind of that 1B type player, now they might have something. But they don't have Robin the Batman right now the way the Celtics do.
Yeah, and regardless of who was the NBA Finals MVP, there was a parade. There was a parade in Boston, and the fact that there's a conversation about that is because Jaylen Brown is also him and can also put a team on his back. And I actually like this little opportunity for Jaylen Brown. I like, but you said it when you talk about Porzingis' health, that to me really becomes sort of that one thing, right? Tatum is a super, super durable top 5 NBA player, right? He gonna be back.
No doubt. Hey, remember this, and I think the old Boston fans do. In 1981, Larry Bird won his first championship. Who was the MVP? Cedric
Cornbread.
Cornbread, exactly. So We go nuts over it. Would Larry Bird like to hand back that ring because he didn't win the MVP? No, he'd put it on his middle finger and tell you to get out of his office is what he would do. So
for those of you that watch the Anik and Florian podcast, and I know Cody Merrow will appreciate this, there's the track at the beginning. It's Boston Garden Rap is the name of the track. Cody will drop the artist, forgive me, but Kenny Florian knew the artist, right? And it's a Boston Celtics. So they got some Johnny Most voiceovers on it.
Oh,
DJ Esoteric, right?
Yeah,
so at the end of it,
with Fred Toucher up in Boston.
So at the end of it, which is an outro, and Cody maybe can bring it on here, it's cornbread. And right, I said to Cody maybe a year ago, and Cody Merrow from New Hampshire, but he didn't know what that cornbread was at the end because he's a youngin', Andrew. So I told him who cornbread was, and so it comes full circle here. And he writes, because I'm a LeBron fan. Yeah, so am I. Anyway, what else we got, Andy?
Here's what I've learned quickly. Those people who covered the 80s in the locker room, they remembered Cedric Maxwell, and I'll leave it at that. Apparently he is very identifiable, especially when nude. Here is dirty boxing, ladies and gentlemen. Now, my kid and I watched this on YouTube because we support our guy Jason Anik, CEO El Romero, against this big, weird, red-headed Sasquatch named Hilton. We were tickled at that. It was fantastic. This guy was an interesting look, to say the least. But Dirty Boxing has their first event. Platinum Mike Perry is on the color commentary. And Jason Anik is not only adding a little bit of flavor to the commentary, but also doing the in-ring interviews. So Dirty Boxing gets this event off the look at that hair, ladies and gentlemen. That is a quaff and a half. Do you have a blast?
I had a blast. It's gosh, man, I could do an hour on this, but I appreciate so much the opportunity. Platinum Mike Perry, so much love for Platinum Mike Perry giving me this opportunity and connecting me with the Kawa brothers who run First Round Management. They represent John Jones and a lot of other athletes. And for me to have the opportunity to do the post-fight interviews and talk to these guys, and it's I could go on, but being John Anik's identical twin brother, I've followed John's career for a long time, and I take so much pride in watching my brother and in what my brother has achieved with his work and the work that he's put in. And I've done a lot of podcasts and sort of regional shows and different things here or there. And so to sort of get an opportunity, you never know when the opportunity is going to come about. I found out about this Monday. I found out about this about 6 days before it was going to happen in Miami, but got to meet a lot of great people. Got to meet John Jones, which I was talking to you guys about before, who expressed a lot of love. A couple times I'm coming out of the octagon. You got John Jones like, yeah, Anik. You know what I mean? How it just makes you feel great. So certainly a lot of bumps. I think you learn a lot from the first broadcast, but it was a fun night. There's this guy from Worcester, Massachusetts. I don't know if you saw him compete. He is the Wolf. His name is Rob Perez. He's a star. He's electric on the microphone. But it was a great night. I'm excited. It's a perfect rule set, right? It's dirty boxing. I got 4-ounce gloves like the UFC, but they're a little bit more rounded. You can use elbows. You can ground and pound. You can sort of grab them in the clinch. The ground and pound, though, you can't have a knee down on the ground or a knee down on your opponent. You got to be standing up. So I think it has great potential. Ice Bags, Josh McLean is behind it. John Jones became an owner of it. So I'm really excited as to what it could become. Certainly there were some bumps on the broadcast the first time, but I think there's a lot of potential with it. It was in Miami. It was a scene. They sold it out 1,000 people. And for me, right, the opportunity to do post-fight interviews, always something my brother John has loved doing. And so that was fun for me. And we did our best, which was all we can hope for. So shout out.
True. You were fantastic. I thought you did a great job. There were some moments there. Like, look, as a broadcaster, like, honestly, I would say to the people who run it, I'm like, hey, I have production notes if you're interested, because there are things that I saw that I'm like, oh, okay, whether it's communication in the headset or whatnot. And I thought there were some awkward moments where you did a really good job of sort of filling in some of the space while they were trying to get to where they were trying to get to with kind of what was coming next. And having done a lot of bad football games, and we've had some questionable, you know what I mean? It's you sort of, from my end, the trained eye knew what was going on. And that's why I compliment you, because you did a fantastic job of filling in a couple of those really sort of awkward gaps.
Well, and the producer, this guy Rich, forgive me, I don't know his last name, was outstanding, right? And we're trying to sort of connect the dots. Platinum Mike Perry, who I thought did admirably, first time ever on the sticks. But I'll tell you a funny story. So Platinum took off his headset, goes into the ring sort of toward the end.
Yeah.
And I hear the producer in my head said, all right, get us out of here, right? What he said was, don't get us out of here, right? Now, I'm not the play-by-play guy, but it was little bit of a hybrid role. And you can be sure I handled a lot of the sort of play-by-play duties, some of the walkouts, different things. So Brendan Tobin, who's a local radio guy down here, who certainly has covered boxing and done some other events, we sort of shared the duties. But I'm getting out of for Brendan Tobin, Platinum Mike Perry. My name is Jason Anik. And then it's like, don't get us out of here, right? And so then we chop it up a little bit. I'm like, all right, BT, get us out of here. But guess what? I don't give a fuck, right? This is right. And I don't say that negatively, right? We're here. I assure you, if DBX2 is there and if they're kind enough to have me back, we'll blow it out of the gate. But what I will say, when I do some of these other promotions, I've been in that big house with my brother John, right? And John and I have a very special relationship, right? We're in the womb together, right? Talk about living vicariously through someone else. It's a unique experience for me. So seeing John on the biggest of stages, I think did make me a little relaxed on a different stage, if you will, because I've been watching him so acutely for so long. So much love for my brother John. None of this happens without him. And so it was a really special night for me.
Well, look, I think the Dirty Boxing people have something. It was a good product. Again, my kid and I sat there and watched 6 fights on the thing on YouTube, and because I did want to support you and take it in, and you just didn't do a good job because you're here working with me and I've known you. No, you really did a nice job on that. And look, you could tell it was their first broadcast. You could tell that you get better as you keep going on, but you were the one that looked the most comfortable of everybody, and that experience really did kind of tie into it. For those that are driving around tonight and have nothing to do, you can catch me on Sirius Satellite Radio on Mad Dog Radio from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. tonight. And then I'll be back on Mad Dog Radio on Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to 1, leading right into, I do believe, some basketball coverage. So at least a little bit of that for those of you who are trying to find me out there in the vast radio wonderland. That is it for this edition of Gas. We got to get out of here. Things are cooking. Things are happening. A lot of stuff is going on. We will see you next week right here on Gas. Don't miss it, you pricks.